Let's talk about the future of live service stuff overall, because on the Friends Per Second podcast, Jason Schreier was also discussing Bungie's Marathon, saying that the state of Marathon, and this is kind of in the wake of everything that's happened with Bungie overall, the amount of layoffs that they've had in the last few years that they've had of development, Marathon is not great from what Jason Schreier has heard. There's a reason it was planned for 2024 and has slipped a whole year. People I've talked to are a little pessimistic about it, even hitting its current deadline, but we'll see. I don't know exactly when that is, sometime in 2025, I'm not sure. Like I said, this comes after various members of Bungie left the project, and Bungie themselves have suffered hundreds of layoffs across this year as well. Marathon is kind of seen as the thing that'll resurrect Bungie in the eyes of the wider populace, the idea that an extraction shooter is the new thing. I don't think any of this is going to come true.
This is the trend issue again. Yeah. We could be literally, we've seen Battlefield 2042 try to do the extraction thing in 2021. I've completely lost it.
Yes.
Yeah, 2021, right? And obviously Battlefield 2042 was a big pile of poo. And there are extraction shooters that are doing well within that space, but I don't know, I feel the priorities are so out of whack here. I'm just, am I so out of touch? I'm having this Principal Skinner moment all the time where I'm trying to get my ideal kind of platonic multiplayer experience.
Well, the thing is, I look, because the thing, I keep going back to Concord, but it's because there's so much money invested in it, and it's such a big deal. It's such a big talking point. The fact that was rejected so outright, and it's so tired, and it feels tired to experience it in regards to the menus, the presentation, and them saying they're going to do this story that'll roll out one cutscene at a time for the next couple of years, or whatever it is. That being so roundly rejected it only vindicated that, no, we are all quite tired of this. And it's very easy to see a trend being chased. Now, in Concord's case, like I said, that game's been in development for so long that, if it came out 4 or 5 years ago, maybe that would have hit better. But still, the idea of, what do people want from Bungie? They're not going to do another Halo. Most of that team, most of those key members have now left. Especially during the most recent round of layoffs. A lot of the key individuals that brought Halo to life, that brought Destiny to life, have now left Bungie. So you've got the remnants of that team. Some of them are being looked over by Herman Holst and Sony now. Some people left to go to Sony, but they're left with the idea of Marathon. The idea of a Marathon itself is named after the original Marathon in the 90s. Trying to do this one idea that is the new Holy Grail, the new Halo, the new Destiny. And maybe that'll be the case, but I still don't think that you can really do something this big on a multiplayer game. I think it would need to actually be if you're going to do another Halo, it needs to have Halo level lore, and a main character and a drive, and it needs to have that much purpose to it.
Exactly, it's why The Last of Us is so big, is it has an actual lore and mythos behind it. Obviously you have stuff like Overwatch, which had its own really, really intricate lore that made it, even more successful. But I agree with you. I think you need to have that kind of heterogeneous approach to the idea of constructing a franchise, and for me, something that feels so trend-oriented, like an extraction shooter, which again, we hyped up the Hunt Showdown before. It's a really, really good game that has its strong core niche within that multiplayer shooter space. For me, it doesn't feel as organic as something we're going to make a cool new franchise, and that's my frustration with it. Even Destiny, that was at the forefront of the looter shooter craze. That was in and around Borderlands, but it was its own. You can't deny that the lore around that thing was completely original and had a unique aesthetic that had going for it. Marathon could have something similar, but couple that with the exhaustion over stuff like Concord and live services, I don't know, I agree with you. If you're going to do a new Halo, you need to look at the reasons why Halo...
And that's just more of a wider conversation on what could they possibly do as Bungie to be able to get back in people's good graces overall, considering how many misses they've had across the last few years, even though the Final Shape DLC is apparently phenomenal. It is pretty phenomenal based on reviews and everything. But yeah, even when they showed off Marathon, the art style's fine. It didn't make me go, I can't wait to play as that character or anything like that. I also, before I pass it over, in regards to extraction shooters or extraction mission stuff, I play everything, and I barely associate that term with anything. The extraction shooter. Maybe that's a mode in a game. I'm not seeking out extraction shooters. I don't know if I'm just in them. I don't know if you are or whatever.
They are kind of they have a lot of popularity. There is you stuff like Escape from Tarkov's kind of at that front niche. These things all do really, really well on YouTube and clearly have an audience. And it's why you see stuff like Call of Duty. I know Warzone has its own extraction game mode. I think that's a bigger focus. In Black Ops 6 maybe.
Well, I'm not sure about Black Ops 6, but it got canned for Modern Warfare 3 onwards. Right. It was the Battlefield
so
situation.
We're already at the point now where they've looked at the trend and gone, we can't hit this space. I think
because it's a mode. It's not. It's not a genre.
Is this a similar issue, Josh, where it's like, you know how esports highly influenced the development of live service games like Rainbow Six and Overwatch, and it came to a point where they're catering so heavily to the esports crowd that it kind of alienates that broader mainstream appeal. Are we getting to the point now that there's some game modes are just fun to watch on YouTube and people less want to experience them repeatedly themselves because the intensity? I don't know. It's really interesting, but I don't know.
No, it is interesting. I think we have, it's probably a wider discussion perhaps, but we have seen, I think, streamers and certain YouTubers who play these games 8 hours a day, literally their job to play like battle royale games or extraction games, having such influence on those games because they are so loud, they have the dedicated player base, but that's maybe to the detriment of the wider player base who isn't at that level, who doesn't play them in that dedicated way and doesn't know them inside out. You know, I do think there's definitely something to that. I think I've got two things that I want to say about this. One is a little bit of a bit, but it's also got some truth behind it. And that's, does Bungie know how to make games? I'm not
Final Shape's awesome.
really sure. Yeah, they eventually can make a game.
You sure it's not several developers in a Bungie suit?
Like, that's not to slag off the quality work they have done, but if you, like you mentioned earlier, Scott, if you look into the development of any of their titles, especially when they're doing something new, like Halo was a miracle, but that went through a bunch of iterations, right? Destiny wasn't received well, and if you look into the development of that game, a complete shambles. They managed to turn it around with Destiny 2, but then it's a roller coaster ride, and now we're back in the same position we were 10 years ago with Marathon, where it seems to be on fire, and it could either be amazing and it could all come together, or it might fall to bits like Destiny 1 did. True. Who knows? But there is so much just nightmarish stuff that seems to go on behind the scenes creatively with the construction of their games that I just don't know how they keep doing it, and I wonder how many times they can mess up without people going, maybe you aren't as good as we thought it was. But back to your perhaps more pressing point on extraction shooters, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to try and get that one big console extraction shooter, because I do think there's a gap in the market in that regard. I just think it's going to be very hard because we have seen other franchises give up on the idea. Call of Duty's DMZ mode and the the extraction mode in Battlefield, for instance, and
they literally got them out of the games entirely.
You can still play the Battlefield one, I think, but it was like a week of interest, and then the live service went back to focusing on conquest gameplay.
And that COD one's gone.
It's gone now. I think it's still playable if you have Modern Warfare 2. So it was supported for that year. I don't think it ever exited beta though.
See, that's fascinating.
And then they dropped it, but at a certain point, I do think Call of Duty and Battlefield just had to choose. Like, I would disagree with what you said that it's not a genre. I do think it's a genre, but that's why it's been killed in these franchises, because you cannot, I just don't think, as big as Call of Duty is, you can't support zombies, the single player campaign, a multiplayer suite, Warzone, and an extraction thing on top of it. You're already spread too thin with the other pillars, right? And I think if you are going to do an extraction mode and do it properly, it needs to be more than a mode. It needs to be way more robust than what DMZ was. So with that in mind, I do think if Bungie is all hands deck on just making an extraction shooter and getting the most out of that premise, it might work. But at the same time, you have to reconcile that with the fact that the extraction shooters we talk about now that are successful, they're getting on. You know, Hunt is getting on. I know it's getting a next gen version literally this week, but even Tarkov, it's getting on, and that might mean there's space for someone to come in and reinvent it for a more mainstream audience, or it might mean that we're just about to move on to something else, kind of how it feels in the battle royale space. I don't think you'll see another big battle royale game now. I think we've got our established pillars down. I think you've got PUBG. I think you've got Fortnite. I think you've got Call of Duty, and you probably will get other titles, but nothing's going to be as big as those games, right? Whereas I do think there is space for an extraction shooter, but by the time it comes out, we might have moved on to something else or moved back to something like the hero shooter boom, and maybe we're more focused on that.
I wonder as well, like, I'm saying the whole thing about mode versus genre, because I've not been convinced yet that like that it can be a self-sustaining genre. You do get games that have different feels, obviously something like a Hunt Showdown or whatever, and I wonder, like, the reason, or you could argue the reason that it didn't work around Battlefield Battlefield and Call of Duty is that those game feels, those engines, that feel of gameplay, the pace to gameplay is built for a different mode entirely. Whereas if you build something that is a bit weightier and is more about sight lines and is whatever, there's a whole different way to do a more military style shooter or something that plays into the way that an extraction shooter is built. However, ironically, unless Marathon doesn't play at all like Halo or Destiny, it's not going to fit again. And so I wonder about that distinction. Will it feel like a mode again? It won't feel like a genre.
Yeah, and for Battlefield in that instance, we know that the hardcore audience for Battlefield want to play Conquest, they want to play Rush, they want to play the stuff that brought them into that is a franchise built on high stakes destruction and mass multiplayer warfare. If you try and distill that down into a small kind of Twitch shootery kind of extraction game mode, it just never made any sense to that game.
That's the thing. Did extraction shooters die, or are they dying, or are they being ignored by sheer comparison to the things they're being bundled up next to, or is always the interest just not there?
It's always a matter of convenience, and this is the reason why I think Warzone, and you might, because you've sunk so many hours into Warzone, Josh, you might disagree with me on this, and the reason why Fortnite has done so well, I think it's a matter of convenience. I think people see the brand new shiny thing, like when PUBG was a thing and not everyone has a PC, Fortnite comes into the console space and says, we can provide you that experience in a sort of immediately kind of retrofitted, kind of smashed together way.
Yeah.
And that became a huge success and has kind of gone on from there. And same with Warzone. Like we used to come to Call of Duty for, fast-paced 6v6 multiplayer team deathmatch stuff. Maybe Search and Destroy has the slower paced gameplay, whatever. And then Warzone was there as that we're going to do our own battle royale thing, but it never felt as if it was like, this is the thing. And then people played it because it's battle royale and I can get it in my Call of Duty game. I think there is an issue here of convenience. And if you're a new IP like Marathon, if you're a new IP in general, maybe that makes it a less enticing prospect for people because it's gone from being in an adjacent space to them to I need to invest my time and attention in something dedicated to that mode.
I'll throw in, sorry, before I pass to you, alongside that idea of because you think that you've got Sony's entire weight of marketing behind Marathon, assumedly when it finally starts to come out. But it's interesting seeing something like Concord try and put a foot in the Sony first party identity, trying to have a story-based element to it, but also primarily being a live service multiplayer shooter. And can that work? To me, it's exciting having the idea of a weekly story. I'm going to come back and see what's happening with these characters. Someone dies, whatever. They're not on the roster for a few months. That's potentially really cool. I know that's not what Concord is. Now that it's revealed itself, it's just cutscenes every week, for 5 minutes. But there's an idea of how to do that. And then does Marathon, if it's alongside the Sony marketing and the Sony first party stuff, does it need to have narrative weight? Does it have to have something even close to what Halo used to have? Or can it just be this extraction shooter that's part of your PS Plus subscription? It is attached to Sony for better or worse now.
Yeah, it's a huge question, right? I think I love Call of Duty Warzone, and I think it's better than Call of Duty's previous attempt at a battle royale mode, which was Blackout in Call of Duty Black Ops 4. However, even though I think it's a better mode, I would be ignorant and naive to assume that it became a global success just because it was slightly higher quality, when the main factor is, I think what you said there, and convenience and the fact that it was free to play. I think you can easily pinpoint the demise of Blackout and the Battle Royale mode for Battlefield 5 because you had to buy into an ecosystem and a game that already exists to play what was perceived as being an extra mode. Whereas I think a genius spin on marketing for Warzone was saying this is a standalone release. It is in conversation with the main game, but you don't have to have the main game to play it. We are going for a broader audience. If you never played Call of Duty before, but you like Battle Royale, you can jump in here, you can get your progression going, and then if you want to, you can buy the main games as they come out so you can help with progression.
Give you Team Deathmatch as well. They give you another mode. Or they used to.
They have limited time modes.
Right. I swear there was, in my forever chasing just a couple of games of Team Deathmatch, I swear that was at one point attached to just a Warzone download, but that's also the insanity of the way Activision have done all of the
that's
stuff.
True. To my knowledge, it was a large team deathmatch mode with Warzone 1, but even then, you have a lot of game modes within Warzone. You've got the Battle Royale, and then you've got the subcategories of solos, duos, trios, quads, and you've got Rebirth and Rebirth Resurgence. You've got all of these little wrinkles, plunder, a lot of different types of modes there. And I think that kind of convenience of, it's Call of Duty, you get the production quality of a Call of Duty gameplay loop, and it's free for the first time ever, and it's this new genre. And I do think, I think it probably started off as something additive, but you could actually see, especially when Warzone was at its peak across that first couple of year period, you could see the development priorities completely shift. And when Warzone was almost envisioned as a way to get people into the main games were then envisioned as a way to get people into Warzone through that kind of cross progression. And I think with Concord and people talking about its 35-pound barrier to entry being too high, Marathon, you have to assume, right, if it's not free to play, because it's Bungie, is probably going to be a little bit higher than that. I think it restricts people from going, yeah, I'll give that a shot. I'll give it a try. Let's see what that's all about. If it's not an established thing that already has, a comparison point or something similar that has already worked, and it's a difficult sell, I think.
I think overall, all those wider conversations going on about what the in-shooter type thing is, and like you said, the evolution of Battle Royale, and then the way the extraction shooter was kind of floated as like, this is the next thing everyone's going to do. But I didn't know that thing about the way that it's been handled on the Call of Duty side.
Yeah.
And if they can't make it work, I think that's kind of damning.
That's the thing again, though. You can tell when the big studios want to make something work. Even when DMZ was announced, I think everyone thought, this is not going to last. It never got out of beta. You could tell from the updates that they just didn't have the resources or the want to commit to it. They could have sacked off other elements of the game and put all their focus in it. And I do think that's kind of where we're at now, because even with Battle Royale, you had PUBG, right? But you had so many imitators that got nowhere near it for those first few years until Fortnite came around. You had good games like, H1Z1 or something that had strong player bases, but I think if we had the conversation about Battle Royale shooters then that we're having about extraction shooters now, we'd probably say the same thing of, we're not kind of convinced yet. I do think it takes someone to come along and kind of convince us and prove that it's more than just kind of these niche, smaller scale productions and come in and say, no, we're making this the next big thing. And maybe Bungie can do that.
Which is maybe what you were saying about, like, you might need something that's actually a way smaller budget, like a Lethal Company sized budget that then blows the F up and makes the bigger teams go like, oh, actually we should do one of them.